Thanks.
We're going down in a couple of weeks.
Oh, okay. Company reunion there in October.
Oh, I'm Marilyn Zaborski from the Stow Historical Society, and this is Katherine Hamilton. She's a senior in the Neshoba Regional High School, and for the past 3 years, she's been working on her Girl Scout Gold Award, which is the highest achievement that can be received in Girl Scouting. And when I first met her last summer, I had to do a little research because when I was a scout, I had never heard of a Gold Award, and so it was very exciting to learn how Girl Scouting has progressed and it has the same honors like the Boy Scouts do. I was really happy to hear that. She's put together a documentary about Native Americans in New England, focusing mostly on the Nipmuc tribe with its reservation in Grafton, Massachusetts. Her documentary, Preserving New England Native Culture Today, is basically an overview of history of the Nipmucs and their land in Grafton. She also will discuss the preservation of past Nipmuc culture, how it's very important to maintaining a strong future for the tribe. Nipmuc is one of the first nations of North America. It was a nomadic people who lived in the southern tip of New Hampshire, all of central Mass, right here, northeastern Connecticut, and northern Rhode Island. In the Algonquin language, Nipmuc means the people of fresh water. If you think of our area, perfect, because that's what they were. She's interviewed several members of the Nipmuc tribe. She's talked to people in Stow, and she's talked to Ray LaChance, who has joined us today, who's also from Stow and grew up in the Abenaki ancestry of the Algonquin-speaking people. So I'm going to turn it over to Katherine, and we're going to have the lights turned off so we can have this room as dark as possible. And I think the lights are going. Okay.
All right, thank you. So today I'm just going to talk a little bit about my project, and then I will show you an oral history video that I created about the Nipmuc Nation and their history and culture. So I've been a Girl Scout for about 13 years, and I've been working on my Gold Award since I started high school, so about 4 years. So just a little overview of what the Gold Award actually is. Basically, it's a big service project, and you have to spend about 80 hours working on it, and you have to be in high school to start it, and there's a lot of different little requirements that you have to fulfill to get the award. So you have to involve your community, show leadership, and your project has to be sustainable. So even when I'm finished, my project will still be continuing, or at least parts of it will be. And there's also the bronze and silver awards. So when you're in like 4th or 5th grade, you can get your bronze award, and that's like a very smaller version of the gold award. And then a step up in middle school, you can do the silver award, and then finally the gold award. So I got my bronze and silver award. And for those projects, I worked with homeless shelters around Massachusetts, and that inspired me to do my Gold Award when I entered high school. So I decided to work with Native Americans originally because I had driven around America with my family, and we had gone through a lot of different reservations in the Southwest and in South Dakota, and that really inspired me, just seeing the reservation life and what it's like to live on a reservation. It really inspired me to do something with Native Americans, although I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I started reaching out to a lot of different reservations through email and writing letters, and eventually I connected with a woman who worked as a reporter on a Navajo reservation in Arizona, and she started emailing me about different ideas that she thought would be really beneficial for that particular community. And one of the things that she mentioned was like an oral history video, which I did end up doing. She thought that since a lot of the older people there had sort of a lot of traditions and culture that they had passed down by word of mouth, none of that had really been recorded or written down, and she thought that would be a really important thing to record that so it didn't die out. So for the Gold Award, you have to write out this proposal and send it to the Girl Scout Council and make sure that they can say, okay, you can do your project, or they will tell you what you need to change before starting it. So they accepted my project, but they said that before I started, I needed to actually travel down to Arizona and do some groundwork first. So I did that the summer after my freshman year, and that was a great experience for me. The woman who I've been emailing was great. She showed me all around the reservation, and I learned a lot about the town's culture just by doing that. So my first step of my Gold Award was a pen pal program, which I started between that town on the reservation in Arizona and obviously Stow. So I had some kids from fourth grade class write letters back and forth between the two fourth grade classes on the reservation and here in Stow. And one thing, I went into one of the fourth grade classes here in Stow that was writing letters, and I presented to them about who they would be writing to and taught them a little bit about the town, who they would be writing to. And one of the things that I really noticed about their views about Native Americans today was that they just really didn't know a lot about them, and they kind of thought that, they were still very similar to, what you think of way back in the day, like living in teepees and, fighting with spears and things like that. So I think this is a really great experience for them, like firsthand to talk to kids their own age, talk about movies and video games that they both liked. So they really got to see like a lot of the differences and similarities on both ends of the two cultures. So that took me about a year to complete, and so as I was moving into my junior year of high school, I started working on the oral history video section. And that was definitely going to be the biggest part of my project. And so I started organizing that and trying to get into contact with some older people on the reservation in Arizona. And as I did that, I learned that I had to run the idea by the Navajo Council, which is kind of like the government of the reservation. And basically they said that they didn't want me to do my project with the Navajo tribe. They had had a lot of bad experiences in the past with people taking information and using it in ways that they didn't really want them to use it. So they didn't want me to do my project, and that was obviously a really big roadblock for me. I kind of had to rethink my whole project at that point. So I started thinking of different options that I could do from there. I really liked the idea of doing an oral history video with Native Americans, so I started looking at other tribes that were maybe a little closer to me and would be a little easier to work with, and I could, move along a little faster since I was kind of running out of time. So as I looked at tribes in Massachusetts, just researching online and things, I saw that there were basically two main tribes, the Wampanoag and the Nipmuc. And so I reached out to both of those tribes, and I was able to connect with the Nipmuc tribe. And when I did that, I discovered that they actually had an Indian reservation right in Grafton, Massachusetts. And for me, that was very surprising because, I had driven through there, and it's just not really what you think of when you think of an Indian reservation. So I got to learn a lot just by doing that. So I started interviewing Nipmucs and trying to connect with some older people, and the first person I talked with was Ray LaChance, and he helped me with my first interview, and he also helped me connect with some other members of the Nipmuc tribe, such as the current chief and the former chief, as well as some other members. And as I moved forward with my interviews, I also got to visit some different Nipmuc ceremonies, like the Summer Powwow and the Strawberry Moon Festival. And again, this was a really great experience for me because there's only about 526 Nipmucs in existence today, and it was just cool for me to be able to be a part of something that was, only celebrated by a few people and only known about by a very few people. So that was really interesting for me. So finally, moving into my senior year, I started putting together all the interviews into this video, which I will show you in a few minutes. And at this point, I'm now working on raising more awareness about the Nipmuc tribe, because a lot of people who live in Grafton, who live on Nipmuc-owned land, don't even know that there's a tribe living in their town. They don't know about the Nipmuc tribe at all. So My goal with my video and presenting to like the Grafton Historical Society and a bunch of different people is basically to raise awareness about the Nipmuc community and also to try to reopen the Nipmuc Museum, which they have a little museum in part of their town, and they used to have a lot of artifacts and facts about their culture and history, but recently, due to a lack of funds and a lack of materials, they had to close down the museum, and they're not really able to preserve the artifacts properly just because they don't really know how to do that. So my goal in this is to involve some different people who actually do know how to preserve artifacts, who can maybe help to preserve the artifacts and reopen the museum so more people can learn about the Nipmuc tribe. So I'm going to now show you my video.
And I think it's important for every person to know their culture, know their lineage, and how important it is, because that's how you got here. Generation after generation after generation, and it's important to keep those ties strong.
As far as the other traditions, the ceremonies that we do today, we just didn't do them because of fear of being bullied or be different from the rest of the people.
But being Native American, that was pointed out, and I think in some ways it helped me out, and but in some other ways it might have held me back.
What do you think of when you imagine an Indian reservation? Maybe this? Or this? Is it impoverished? Are the houses thinly spread across a barren grassland or desert? Most people wouldn't imagine a small suburban town in Massachusetts. However, Grafton, Massachusetts is and always has been the recognized Indian reservation for the Hassanamisco Nipmuc tribe.
There are people who live in Grafton that don't even know there's a reservation. And that piece of property has never been owned by the state of Massachusetts. It's been property of the Native American.
Although Grafton has always belonged to Native Americans, the Nipmuc people did not always reside there. The Nipmuc people, or freshwater people, originally occupied parts of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. Throughout these areas, a wide variety of villages were linked together by kinship, trading, or common enemies. They hunted, gathered, harvested, and mostly resided in Wetu. The earliest known contact between English and Nipmucs was possibly 1621 in Sterling, Massachusetts. Initially, relations between colonists and natives were very friendly. Later, around 1640, Reverend John Eliot established praying towns around New England. These were villages that would distance Native Americans from their culture and religion, so it would be easier to convert them to Christianity.
A missionary came and tried to organize Native people here in Massachusetts and Connecticut into praying villages. Originally it was like, I think it was 8,000 acres. And that went on for at least 100 years or so. Maybe not quite that much, maybe 75 years. It existed as a praying village.
After a major war among New England natives and Europeans called the King Philip's War, the English pushed Nipmucs further out of their land. To survive, many Nipmucs moved to their settlements or acquired English habits and dress. In the 1700s and 1800s, Nipmuc men assisted Americans in the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. In 1869, Nipmucs, along with all other Massachusetts natives, were given citizenship by the Massachusetts Indian Enfranchisement Act. This change also opened Indian-owned land to everyone, so a lot of land was divided or lost. Many Nipmucs gathered on the reservation in present-day Grafton. Here, they celebrated traditions like the annual clam bake that are still enjoyed today.
Around in July, We had a gathering of all the Indian families in the area where we had clams and lobsters and corn and succotash and all those Indian foods that we cooked in the native way. But that's one of the traditions that the natives did. They went to the ocean and met with other tribes, and they had a big feast, and that's where they had it.
Throughout the first half of the 20th century, Nipmucs continued traditions and tribal elections. Many men fought in World War I and II, while women worked in factories and raised children. In 1962, the Hassanamisco Foundation was created to ensure that the reservation would be preserved. In 1976, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts officially recognized the Hassanamisco Band of Nipmucs, allowing the reservation in Grafton to remain. While Nipmuc saw success at home, many also felt the weight of events occurring in other parts of the country.
They signed up to vote and filled out the form, and when it comes to race, it says black and white. Well, they knew I was Indian, so I asked the town clerk. She says, "Do you see Native American on there?" And I said, "No." She said, "Well, you're either black or you're white, one or the other." So I didn't finish the form.
The 1973 occupation of Wounded Knee in Pine Ridge resulted in both death and imprisonment of activists fighting for Native American rights.
Wounded Knee, that was another thing that went on. It didn't affect our tribe, but it affected us as a people and how our people were being treated. It didn't matter if it was out west. But, we all think of ourselves as one. What happens to them happens to us. So that affected us a lot.
Today, there are about 526 surviving Nipmucs. This small population could make it difficult to maintain their culture, but people everywhere are working to keep the tribe and its heritage strong.
It was the Nipmuc tribe where I became chief, and that was just through other people's observation. Okay, they kept an eye on me when I was younger, and they knew that I was interested in it, and I took a big interest in it. And then back in 1978, they made me a chief.
My title is actually Sungsqua, which means female leader. Chief Vickers wanted to retire. He had been chief for 34 years, and he's still chief. And so he had 3 names that he submitted to the elders, and I was selected from the 3. So, I personally am involved in a lot of different things. Our language efforts, revitalizing our language, regaining some of our land that we lost, making sure that our Nipmuc children stay within Nipmuc families and are not parceled out to foster care or adoption to non-Nipmuc families.
Being Native American, that was pointed out, we never hid what we were, because we always knew what we were, and some people tried to bury it.
My family would never say they were Native. We were told we were Indian, but we were never told what tribe, and that's as far as it went. I was considered, because my skin was darker, I was called a nigger and all that stuff. Yeah, there was a lot of bullying and stuff in the high school years. Today, we have all ceremonies, almost every month, powwows and stuff like that. People came out of coming out of their shells, they didn't care anymore. But during our childhood, we didn't have many traditions that I knew of.
2 of the largest traditions still practiced by the Nipmuc tribe today include the Strawberry Moon Festival and the annual Summer Powwow. The Strawberry Moon Festival usually occurs in June and is celebrated in honor of an old Nipmuc story about a brother and a sister. The story says that the siblings got in a fight while walking in the woods and then parted ways.
As they were going through the wilderness, they thought about their love for one another and the missing of each other. And there was these red strawberries, and the girl started picking them up, and she would drop the tail of the strawberry. Then the brother, as he was missing his sister, decided to go looking for her. And he come across the strawberry tails, and he followed them. And they reunited, and their problems were resolved.
The festival symbolizes the rebirth and renewal of spring and gives people a chance to start fresh.
We celebrate it as a renewal of a season, of a new year, you know. And any adversaries you might have had, you would just forget them.
The powwow is the most widely attended event, and it gives families a chance to reconnect, as well as allowing people from outside the tribe to experience the cultures and ceremonies of the Nipmuc people.
I have an annual powwow, which is on the last Sunday of July, and that's held in Grafton, up on the reservation. The money that we make from there sustains the reservation for the following year.
Aside from the powwow, most people are not given the chance to learn about the Nipmuc people and their heritage. The homestead that once stood with its doors open as a museum has been forced to close down due to damage. The longhouse, which served as the second part of the museum, was removed in 1988. With such a small population and so many responsibilities, the tribe does not have the funds, resources, or knowledge to properly preserve the museum and its artifacts. The Nipmuc tribe is not a dying breed, but it will remain a hidden treasure if it is left unnoticed and unappreciated by its community.
My overall duty is to make sure that our culture and our heritage and our way of life and our people survive, continue to survive, that we pass on our traditions and our cultures to our children. It's more making sure that we have the life that we want.
Well, you have to maintain your tribe. You have to maintain the reservation. We don't want to lose what we've got.
Things are starting to come together now, that we were to realize that we were people. We weren't different from everybody, but we were a distinct entity.
Okay, thank you very much. So I can take questions now, or
Any questions?
yeah, yeah.
I'm curious, there's a Nipmuc State Park in Connecticut. It has some bowl-shaped depressions in the ground about 3 feet wide and lined with stones, and I wondered what those were for.
I don't actually know. There's another band of Nipmucs who lives in Connecticut, and I'm not as familiar with that band, so I don't know if maybe Ray LaChance knows, or...
My name is Ray LaChance. I'm really a Beneke and Micmac, a French Canadian. We moved down and lived in Stow, and my grandfather was in Sudbury, but I always did the culture and lived the culture, and I do programs throughout New England. And the answer to that shortly is we are still finding. I belong to the New England Native American Institute, which is made up with Ken White. Now, he's Chadwanagunga. There are many factions of Nipmuc, just like saying Algonquin. Well, the Algonquin goes down through the Carolinas all the way up to Canada. And then we have different dialects and everything, our own culture, and we do have different ceremonies and things that, excuse me, I should be talking with Katherine. But we find all kinds of ceremonial circles. We found them in Grafton Park. We find them everywhere. And sacred stones, quartz stones, gouge stones where they had ceremonies and they would grind to have the grinding corn circle, and they would grind. I found it actually when I moved to Northborough. There was a stone out in the woods, and I said, this has got to be, and you could see it was in the leaves and everything, and I hollowed it out. And at one time, if you looked, you could see these rocks were placed all the way around in a circle. And they would have a ceremony. Now that had to have been back in the 1300s. I'm not an archaeologist, I really don't know. But they would grind the stones and the children would collect the kernels and mash them, and it was just, so that sounds typically what we have. The Nipmucs were trying to get, it's a little misleading to say that they're recognized because they are not recognized. The Wampanoags of Massachusetts, and that's why you find in the social studies in the curriculums of Massachusetts. But as far as the Nipmuc, they own the largest portion of land and they get absolutely no treatment. And it's wonderful that Katherine has taken on this project because we all live in this area, Hudson, Stow. This whole area of the Nashua Valley with Chief Chelan, and I did a presentation in Stow at the Stow Story Slam a few years back. And part of the New England Native American Institute is historical nature. We look up, how did this cave get there? And this was in Webster. And this cave, they thought, one faction said it was built by the Vikings in the early, no, it was a Native American. They put their corn stave and they had it there, and then the English, they were starving to death, came out here before Thanksgiving, stole all the corn from these stoneland, and they were this lineage up on Wachusett Mountain, that was our sacred mountain, and stole it. But you won't read that in the history books. So consequently, over the years, Ken and Walter, representing the chieftains of each, they're the sachems of each of those lineages, but there's 20-something other factions and clans associated with the Nipmuc culture. And I don't pretend to speak for the Nipmucs. I'm not. I just know he's called Gentle Warrior. His son is Tall Pines, David. And he is instrumental in bringing the Nipmuc language back. And he's doing an outstanding job of educating people the language. Because we did a recent project 2 years ago, and it was out in Webster, okay? And that tribe was represented by Ken, Chabanaga. It's the longest word and basically means you guys, we got into a fight, so you guys stay on your side of the way. We'll stay over here. Nobody's going to fish in the middle, where that was. But we investigated, and we looked in this area that the kids played soccer. And said, we read in the archives the history and everything, and we did the research, and there used to be 60,000 acres of land in Webster, in this whole area. What happened? Gookin, Elliott, and his boys Christianized. It's another way of getting the Native Americans and assimilating them and get them out of their way. You know what the big purpose was? Colonists could come in and take over this land. Something like, and don't hold me to the facts, but 10 to 15,000 acres of Elliott's son got that, and this one got that, and this one got that. To the point is, I don't know, it was the mayor or somebody back then in Webster or in Worcester, judge said, no, we're going to hold these 4 acres of land for the culture. And there was a field there. The kids played soccer and nobody. So we did the research. And finally, we found out this indeed was the Piegan Nipmucs. And the Piegans were noted to be assimilated in with the blacks. So it was a black culture with native lineage. Because you had to propagate, because you had farms to run and you needed the population. So we brought a stone down from New Hampshire from one of our Nipmuc friends on a farm, huge stone, it's grandfather rock. They trailered it down, we put it in the ground. I built a kiosk with it. Dave White, who does a lot of the paintings, historical perspective paintings on native culture in Washington, D.C., did one for me, and we said it's about this big. If you go at the Pegan Park down there, you'll see it. And also a brief history and description in this kiosk. And that field we blessed, we had dignitaries come in, and this was about 2 years ago, and we blessed and purified that land. So going forward. So now we're trying to get the Nipmucs to come together. There's always been that faction because of keeping track. That's the hardest thing to prove. It's called the honor roll, the bloodline, you know, because the government said, oh, you married her, she's Irish and you're a Native American, well, you lost your bloodline. So therefore, you're not entitled to these things. It was very horrific. And there was always a faction between the Hassanamisset and the Chambana-Gangaban. They couldn't get together to solidify, but as Ken said, we're coming together and getting stronger and trying to get more representation to get recognized by the state of Massachusetts, but more importantly, the federal government. So these children and grandchildren can get educational funding for, and that's the way, it's through education. As a teacher for 42 years, it's critical. So, I'm sorry.
No, that was great. No, I appreciate it.
But having worked with all these people, and if you saw the one picture there, I don't know, Walter Vickers was there, one of the other stations, and Paul Bullis, who recently passed away, he had the Stow and feathers that was typically the Algonquin and Nipmuc and Abenaki headdress, not the feathers that you see the Western Plains, you know, out there and all that. So thank you, Katherine.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're
Sorry,
welcome.
any other questions? One question we had. Liz?
Is the Nipmuc language written down any place in terms of
Yes.
transmitting it?
It is. If you go online, you can find certain parts. But Dave White, if you get a hold of, he is in Southbridge, did live in Southbridge, but he runs a great program. And my name, Beneke, which is Algonquin, is called the N dialect. There's no tomato, and it means the water view. Because every time when I was in Stow, I was either riding cows up up behind the Pilot Grove farm. That was my fun at recess. You can ride cows? Yeah. My mother did this, well, I ride cows. Yeah, no. So I went up on the hill and showed him. Got right on that old cow. But anyways, yeah, there is a language. And Dave White is the one that's instrumental. Just like Vern Stanley, I also belong to the Mass Center for Native American Awareness. And that is a Wampanoag Nation. And instrumental in providing heat, fuel, food substance, and everything for the very impoverished and poor of the Native American culture out in that part of the country. But that's all you hear about is the Wampanoags. But huge. You saw the vast area of the Nipmuc culture that's here. You look around and it's everywhere.
And we're very fortunate that in September, Ray's coming to come to West School program on a Sunday afternoon, 27th, I believe it is. So we'll be having him again in West School. Okay, now we have another question.
Well, I wanted, I'm Catherine's mother, so I don't have a question for her, but, Ray, like, when we went to this reservation, to the powwow and stuff, this museum just seemed so cool, and like, they used to have scout programs there and things like that, and now, you know, it's all shuttered and closed, and I don't, you know, do you know anything about the status of that?
I do, because one of the, Princess Winona, I think was her name, she was very instrumental in the preservation of all the artifacts at the museum. And once Walter kind of stepped down, things just went awry. There was no accountability, and things, to this day, I don't even know where those artifacts went. I know where Ken is. I mean, we've talked about setting up a museum in Webster in control. All their artifacts are down in his cellar and other people, and it's a shame because you lose that. When I was playing the flute, you saw all the artifacts that I have in there, and that's only one part of it, because I have artifacts from all over the country. I've gone to the reservations, talked with the chiefs. I was up in the Makah Reservation up in the West Coast, farthest west you could get. And they were ready to go out on a whale hunt. The federal government said, you can't go out with whales. But the Japanese would come in 2 miles off camp and slaughter the whales and the seals and take them away. But the elders could not teach their son the tradition of going out and catching the seal and the bladders and the fun of going out with the spears and catching the whale and all that whole process. They couldn't even salmon fish. They had to go down to Portland, Oregon. So, and the demise of, trying to capture all those artifacts is there was a real division between those two, Hasidamasa and the Chabanagangama, just because of power. They couldn't come together. And that's always, right, trying to get two people and to get together. But hopefully, as Ken said, they're trying to work together, preserve the language through Dave White. He's doing a tremendous job. In the fall, we do a powwow. It's not in Webster, but I do part of that. I do ceremonies and flute playing, storytelling, and games. And I've been doing it in Stow for 25 years because my roots are still in Stow. It's just worked on Stein's Farm, McDonald Farm, and I know when the road, the Hollybrook Bridge was just dirt roads all the way to Hudson, and went in and apple farming, part of our culture was to help and share, respect. Those are very important values we grew up with. Learning about domestic engineers, going under the leaves, looking for big night crawlers and putting them in the garden. Because they work the soil, not fertilizer. And running around, all those kids collecting cow manure, bringing it back to the gardens, right? So, anyways.
Oh, we have,
I have a question for Kathy.
okay,
Yes,
yes, okay.
To be congratulated. I think it's so wonderful what you did, what you pulled together, how you presented it, etc. I'm impressed.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
2 quick questions. Only boys in our family. Is this akin to an Eagle Scout? Do you have to go before a board or present this to actually get your award? Just a little bit about that process. And then what's next for you?
Well, yeah, I do have, as I said in the beginning, I had to write that proposal.
Right.
And so now when I finish, I have to kind of say how I did everything that I said I would do on the proposal.
Yep.
And I, again, go before the council, the Girl Scout Council, and they either approve it or don't approve it. So, yeah.
And what's next for you?
College?
Yes, yeah. I'm actually going tomorrow to Accepted Students Day at Clark University. So I'm guessing I'm going to go there, but I haven't exactly committed, but that's my top choice. So.
Is your interest in this topic going to be carried through to your educational interests, or is this something that you will be, not a hobby, but I know we all have passions outside of our careers. Is this going to be a passion, or are you going to use this in your education?
I would really like to use this in my education. At Clark, they have a major called International Development, so I'd like to do something maybe similar to this, and I'd also like to minor in journalism, so I think doing this video and interviewing people will help me kind of move toward that direction as well.
Well, as a senior citizen, I'm encouraged by your enthusiasm.
Thank you.
We don't always hear all these good stories about the younger generation. They don't always make the newspaper.
Sure.
We have one more.
Yeah.
This is a great piece of work, and I hope it doesn't get lost.
Yeah.
Where is this going to be archived?
I'm still working on that a little bit. It's currently on YouTube. But I don't know, I have to talk with Marilyn a little more about that.
It's going to be with Stow TV, we'll have it too.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think YouTube is a great place also because that's there forever.
Yeah. Yep.
All set?
I actually a question for Ray. You talked about people being able to prove that they have Indian heritage, and for the past, 100, 150 years, there's birth certificates, probably accounting for everyone. But then we get people like Elizabeth Warren who can't go back all that far. So, and that's probably not the only case. There's probably many other cases like that. Is there anything that these folks can do to help prove their heritage?
Well, we have more and more technological advancement that will help you. For example, Ancestry, they do a good job, but they lead you on more and more, and it's about money, obviously. But you have to do the groundwork. And I went back to Canada and traced where we were from. LaSalle, Notre Dame d'Est Bridge. We found our Odanak on the St. Francis, and part of the lineage that I found out that our tribe came down in the Bloody Creek Massacre in Deerfield, stole, rostrum and a whole bunch of them people, brought them back to Canada. Because we were fighting, the English and the French were fighting and taking a lot of our native people prisoner, and we didn't have the women, so we needed to propagate our population, and that's what they did. And it's not something, I was directly involved with, but you find out all this, what's behind that door. Maybe I don't want to know. But yeah, there's ways of doing it. It takes a lot. Like Katherine, obviously, she's done a yeoman's lot of work, and congratulations, Katherine. It came out really marvelous, and it should be preserved, because in the light of today, with these politicians, they're ranking out there. But I've seen firsthand what fracking does. The hundreds of chemicals they pound in the ground to get out cheap gas at 3 cents. Is it worth it to contaminate hundreds of acres and miles, of all these chemicals? And we don't know, and then find out 20 years, that it's horrible. And the basic lineage of our culture has always been, life is balanced. Whatever you put in or take out, it has to be a balance. And our values that I tell the children, it's the web of life. Once we think we're better than the animals, the birds, and the plants, we're sinking fast. And Seattle said it very, very eloquently. They said, we're going to get a native man to come to Washington and speak. He'll make a fool of himself. Well, he stood there, and he just looked him in the eye. And he says, you are contaminating, be careful what you do to Earth, Mother, and Father Sky. Because what you have to have this balance. You try to own the land that Earth, Mother preserves and provides for you. Be careful what you do to her. And he looked at, one of the congressmen, he was kind of smirky. He said, you tell me what part of that sun you own. You tell me what part of the raindrops that come down every day and nourish the ground that you own. We share it. It's part of that circle of life. We're interconnected in a place with sun. And he walked out. Bravo, thank you. I just said, but that's what's going around. Climate control, environment, and yes, it is a big issue. And fortunately, there's only a couple of people that are standing up and saying, yeah, the climate is very, very important. It's all well and good when you go, but just go to Wegmans the other day. There was a problem with the control on it. Lettuce was not there. All the vegetables, the produce. People, where's our vegetable? Well, did you go out there and grow them? Chickens don't just jump in a package. And I tell the kids that there's a process that they go through. Sorry.
And Ray comes into our third grade in the fall. And he has all the 5 third grade classrooms in the gym. And by his lonesome, he works with those kids for an hour, and he has them mesmerized, and he has them dancing, and he has them doing all sorts of games. I watched him this fall because the Historical Society comes in January, February to do a program with Stow history, our very early history. And I needed to know exactly what he did so I could reinforce that in the classroom. And so that takes us way over here. Not having a permanent Historical Society or a permanent display, we have a traveling display, which you can see right here. We have Indian deeds in our vault in the town building. We have the original Indian deed, which through a tremendous amount of work, several of us actually transcribed it. If you take a look at this writing, you will understand why it was so difficult. We had to learn in the 1600s what each little squirrel meant, because the writing is so different than ours. And then we transcribed it, literally what they wrote, and then modernized it with corrected spelling. What's really interesting about this is that people are saying, what, Stow actually has the deed? And it was December 23rd, 1863, when it was written. And what was very interesting over here is that our deed is actually dated earlier than Concord and Sudbury's deeds, even though those towns are much older. Because in 1864, what did I say, 18? I'm sorry. 1684, the British government revoked the charter, and all the towns had to prove that they owned the land. So they had to recreate the deeds. And Stow being, this was what they called the mean land, because we had many rocks and swamp in our area. Our deed was actually dated and solidified before Concord and Sudbury's final deeds. And when you read the deeds, and you go through it, and it's most of the same names. There's very few Nipmucs that have survived. We have Ben Bohu, we have John Speen, James Speen. If you think in Natick, Speen Street, that's where it comes from, the Speens. We have many of the same names. When we go into the third grade, we project part on the screen. We have a big whiteboard, a little bit of the deed, and in the corner it says Pasitacut. And I have the kids show the syllables and have them pronounce it. And until this year, like that, they got it, because what was the name of the elementary school? Pompasiticate. This year, none of the children at Center School attended Pompasiticate. Those with older brothers and sisters got it, and the whole bunches of kids are like, what's that? What's that? We are losing our name, the Pompasiticate name. And in the deed, we have Pompasiticate spelled many different ways, but it is in the deed, the name of this area. Our area was the Pompasiticate. Over here, we have a few of the artifacts that we have in the town vault, and we don't have a permanent place to display, so they come back and forth. The children in the third grade all have an opportunity to take a look at these. In a PowerPoint, I put some of these up, but they're 8 and 9 years old, so we don't go into too much depth of that. And they are actually, they hold these, they pass them around. We have them in 2 circles, and they go around, and they're in awe. And all of a sudden they say, whoa, this was Native American land. And all of a sudden, everything that Ray had said, when they touched these, it like, wow, they got it. Because in their class, what they talk about the Wampanoag, the Puritans, and when they realize it's the Nipmucs that were here, they're not going to forget it. Well, some will, I'm sure, but most of them, they got it, and it was very, very interesting. And what we tried to do, this work is, Bob McDonald in Stow has done a tremendous amount of work categorizing not only our few that we have, but several hundred. And it's quite a science how they do this. You need to be a geologist, you need to be an anthropologist, you need an archaeologist to pull it off. And I put some of these up so that you could see a little bit about these. And what is fascinating is that where all the different rocks originated, the actual stone. So they studied not only the shape of it, but what was the original place? Like, my grandsons really like this because it came from the Merrimack River up in Manchester, New Hampshire, and that's where they live, and they're really excited about that one. And all the different shapes. We have over here, this is one picture, this is from 2 years ago, of some of the third graders just in total awe of being able, they held the skinning tool, and you could see where you could put your fingers, and when you were curing the leather. And then we have different things for, if you want to look here, this is from 2002. It talks about where the area, in our area in Stow, where there's more than likely Native American artifacts. Along the Assabet River, Boone Lake, all of the greater areas where there's fresh water, people are still finding arrowheads. They're here. And I know many people have collections in Stow, and if we had a permanent spot where we could securely display them, I'm sure they would be on display. So that's just a little bit about our history. It's very interesting. It's amazing when you go into the town vault and start digging what's actually there, what survived. To me, it's what survived. That we still have from 1683, 1685, notes in the deeds. It's quite amazing. So are there any more questions? Wonderful. So I thank Katherine. This is it's been a work in progress. We started talking about this last summer. So it's been a long process. You could see how long, 3 years. We have to get the microphone beside each other here. That's why we're moving over. It's been a long process. It wasn't something that she just decided this summer that she was going to do. And then this is senior year. So she had to figure out how to plan her whole year to get this, not only schooling, but to finish up her project. So again, let's give her a round of applause. Okay, so take a look at what we have here. We have some wonderful refreshments out in the other room. Mosey around.
One of the things about artifacts, is that when I was here, Spindle Hill, I don't know, there used to be a ski tow there. Those of you that have been in town on the library.
Heard the stories.
Pardon?
Heard the stories.
You heard the stories? Yeah, a lot of them up there. But midway up there was a boulder, almost the size of this room, left from the glacial period, okay? And one day, my dad and I, we happened to be up there, and we were sitting climbing the hill, and I remember reaching down and in the stones, and I saw a flat stone. I'm ready, just like a kid. I was about 9 years old, to chuck it. Then I looked down, and I thought I saw writing, and I picked it up. And it said, "The Commonwealth of Massachusetts," and it was an Indian with a bow on it from 1800, and I still have that coin. When we made it up to the top, that was a lookout when the Nipmucs in this area were going to fight, and they were ready to either go to Sudbury or Concord to fight the revolutionaries because they did not like the English at all either. And when I was up there, digging around again in the rock, just like a kid, how children are. They notice the minute details, right? And I reached down and I found an arrowhead that had been broken off, and it was a blue meridian from the original stone. Is from the Ohio River Valley. And I found it very unique that you read a lot of these, the Columbia River, Northwest. How did these artifacts get here? So there was a bartering and trade system going on. And the government tried to repudiate that, but we know better. But thank you, Katherine. That was nice. Really nice. Love it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Glad to
So we're in good shape for Memorial Day. I got flags. I got the flags, I got the banners, got medallions.
I was just up the cemetery during the week last week, and there
Oh,
are a
sure.
number of flags.
The crunch time.
The flag has come off the staff.